Welcome to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. Our mission is to connect the past and the present NICU mom by bringing them out of isolation and into a sisterhood of women who can stand alongside each other as we heal and grow both in and out of the NICU.
Our hope is that through interviews with trauma-informed medical and maternal mental health experts and vulnerable stories from NICU mamas themselves, that you would feel connected to the Dear NICU Mama sisterhood around the world. So, whether your NICU journey was 50 years ago,
or whether you find yourself in the NICU today, we hope that this podcast reminds you that you are not alone.
Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. It's your host, Martha, and
Ashley.
Ashley, you look like a dewy spring day today.
Oh, it's probably because I'm trying a new tinted sunscreen, and it has a little bit of dewiness in it. It kind of takes me by surprise. I can't tell if I look oily or dewy.
No, I think you look dewy. You look dewy. You look fantastic.
So do you.
Because I was wearing intense sunscreen the whole week because I was in Florida. I have cool chin acne, like the entire length of my chin.
Okay, do you get chin acne from sunscreen too?
All the time, so bad. And so
Which one are you using?
Well, I use Neutrogena. I know people are like, oh, you should try Supergoop.
Don't use Supergoop. Don't use
okay,
Supergoop.
Okay.
Because it broke me out so bad around my face, like my chin and my lips.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. Apparently, there's like some really great Korean skin care that's supposed to be good for SPF, so I should look into it. But anyway, I did that. I broke out. I was talking with Sarah, our podcast coordinator, and I was FaceTiming her. I was packing, and she's like, "Why are you bringing 2 packages of pimple patches?" And I was like, because this is my journey. I was like, I will get horrific cystic acne on. Does this have anything to do with NICU families? No, but I'm so sorry. That's where we're at.
I mean, we could direct it back to post hormones or something.
Yeah. And really,
maybe it's a trauma response.
Yeah. You know what? Just like my face is breaking out, we're breaking out of trauma cycles.
Oh, yep. That was, yep.
Okay, well, you didn't seem as impressed as I was hoping, so.
I just don't know how I feel about relating breaking out of trauma to my zits, but I get the sentiment.
Your body is expelling garbage. This is great. This is all really good stuff.
This is why people tune in. Yeah.
Well, today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of having a dear friend and a team member here to talk about something really beautiful and close to both of our hearts. We've had her on before, and she's shared the story about her kiddos. We'll definitely make sure to link that. But welcome, Aisha. We're so glad that you're here.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Oh, man. Ashley, do you want to say like a bunch of glowing things about Aisha, and then I can say a bunch of glowing things about Aisha?
Yes, I would love to say glowing things about Aisha. What was the team award you gave Aisha again? You were like Oprah's favorite things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like she'd be on the list.
Yeah, she'd be on the list. Yeah. Like a lovely cashmere sweater.
I have that hanging over my side of the bed so that Andy sees it every time. He's reminded as well.
Just a reminder, I am as good as one of the items on Oprah's favorite list. But no, Aisha, we love you so much. Anytime we have the chance to hear from your heart, hear from your wisdom, whether that's in something that you write or create or an episode on the podcast, we always leave just feeling like we've been hugged. You do such a beautiful job of telling your story in such a vulnerable way, and at the same time in a gentle way that feels just like a true honor and a gift to be there when you share. And so we love you so much. We were very excited that you were able to do this episode, and we've been looking forward to it.
Yeah. Aisha has shared a really beautiful episode before about her journey with her son Enzo and her daughter Ava, and they're really lovely, and I think that you have a stillness and a wisdom about you that I know that listeners love and we love too. Ash and I were just like texting about you the other day and how wonderful you are. We do it frequently.
Thank you guys both. You both are gifts to me, and as for every mama listening, we all just Love you guys so much. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for this space.
Well, if you are listening for the first time or listening for the millionth time, season 6 is all about growing our families after NICU. And we've tried to be intentional to share as many diverse experiences of that as possible, knowing full well that there's no way that we could cover every single experience, but trying to honor the many different facets of what it looks like to grow our families after NICU. And so for this episode, Martha and Aisha are going to talk about growing their family after loss. And so, Martha, do you want to take it away and kick off the episode?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, just sharing a little bit background about Aisha and our stories. I can go first. I've had 2 NICU kids. My son, JP, was born in 2015. He was a 25-weeker, and he unfortunately only lived for 3 days. And then I had my daughter, JJ, a few years later, and she was born at 29 weeks and had a 47-day NICU stay. And then we brought her home, and I mentally devolved as I was processing grief and the trauma of what had happened over the past 4 or 5 years. And so we, with that perspective, I know it's really important to kind of talk about this focus today on pregnancy after loss, NICU potentially after loss, and how you make that decision and navigate it too. Aisha, do you want to share a little bit about your beautiful babes?
Yeah, so I think when I was last on, it was around this time, because I just got a memory, and I feel like it was around this time that we
makes
had
sense.
got together and talked about Enzo and JP. And I didn't know that much about your story. I hadn't heard your podcast. So we ended recording, and I went back and I listened to it and just sobbed because there were so many things that I resonated with. So I too had a 24-weeker, Enzo, in 2018, and he was with us for 7 hours, and then had Ava a year after, and what happened, maybe. So in 2020 was when she was born. I conceived her a year after, I guess. And she was 26 weeks. I was 26 weeks pregnant when I had her, and she had an 82-day stay in the NICU. And like you said, I think once I had her was when I really dove into my grief, my healing journey. Before I mentioned the year because I think that's a really important marker for me, because when I had Enzo, after I had Enzo, you still have to go to the 6-week postpartum checkup because you did give birth.
Yep.
And I go to my appointment, and the only thing in my mind at that time was, when can I try again?
Yeah.
That was the only question I had. And, like, she goes through the whole spiel, checking me, how I'm feeling, blah, blah, blah. And, look, do you have any questions? When can I try again? Like, instantly, that was my question. And she told me, you know what? At least a year. Just wait a year, give it a year, and then you can try again. And so then that day, it started in my head, a countdown to a year. And I told myself, okay, that's good. A year should be enough time for me to process the loss that I just experienced. I think I knew I was like aware enough to know, like, okay, yeah, you need that time, you need that space to grieve and to process, and not like jump into another pregnancy without really having dealt with all this stuff that you go through when you experience loss. So I was like, perfect, a year, that'll be great. Like, I'll just do that, and then I'll get pregnant, and it will all be how it's supposed to be. But really, I say all that because I think in my head, I had processed. In my head, I'm like, yeah, I journaled, and I grieved. It wasn't like I wasn't grieving, but it really wasn't until I had Ava that I really started the journey of healing. And it really took me by surprise how much I hadn't dealt with, how much I kind of put a Band-Aid over, told myself like, oh yeah, I'm okay now. And a lot of that I think is maybe misconceptions of like, your grief, I know that it's forever, but it gets less and you can learn to live with life. But what I didn't know is like, no, sometimes, I'm 3 years out and sometimes I have a grief that is so intense, as if it were the day that I lost my son. So it's funny that like whole, like the feeling gets less intense with time. Yes, there's parts of truth in that, but then also it can be the opposite, and that can really catch you by surprise. So yeah.
I definitely would encourage those who haven't to go back and listen to when we talk about grief and Enzo. It's really beautiful. And Aisha, you do such a wonderful job talking about it. But, I think back to my 6-week postpartum appointment with my doctor after having JP. And I remember very similar experience. Of course, I think most people who've experienced neonatal loss or stillbirth or miscarriage or, any of the other types of losses that surround the postpartum time or the pregnancy, we hear a lot of those well-meaning but like really painful comments of, at least you can get pregnant or you can have another one, blah, 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 blah. And I think we all know like that's having another child is not a Band-Aid or doesn't fix that loss, right? And at the same time, I also feel like a lot of us feel like this mission of like, okay, I had that baby. And then you kind of snap to a logistical place. Okay, so if I wait this time, if I do this, then I can have that not happen again, right? It's not necessarily about getting rid of the old experience because that pain and love is with you forever, but it's about how do I make it right? How do I do it what can I do to protect myself and my child moving forward? You're seeking to control it, right? Because we went through probably the most horrific example of lack of control possible. I don't know. Is that how you kind of felt? I know you said you talked about like the Band-Aid of putting on your emotions.
No, absolutely. And even what you said about, you said something in the lines of like, it's like, how do we not repeat, right? Like it's not like we want to do it over and do it not having the same outcome. And I remember when we found out we were having a girl, it was so shocking because I had Enzo, he was my boy, and I was like, well, I think really my husband really wanted a boy. So when we were pregnant, I was like, oh, please let it be a boy. I want my husband to have his son. And then we were having a girl, and it took us a full day to like let that sink in. And but then when we did, I think it was like, okay, well, you know what? This is a new chapter. This is not like we get to do it all differently because now we're having a girl. And the one thing that they told me over and over again when we did find out it was a girl, I was like, oh, you must be so happy because girls are so,
let's do better.
Yes, they just and that was like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want any sort of like I don't want you to put those two together. Like, why are you even suggesting that? Yes, I think there was a part of me that's like, yeah, this is a do-over. That's what I wanted it to be like. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do it right, like you said, and we're not going to have this grief hanging over our heads. And even though I didn't want to hear, like, girls have a better fighting chance, like, that was another little thing that I could put in my bag and say, like, okay, At least I know that. And so, yeah, for sure. I did go into a little bit more of like a mechanic. Like my second pregnancy was more, it felt like mechanical. Like, what are we, how are we just going to like make the time pass?
Yep.
Every day is like a victory. Yeah, it was intense though, because you still got that stress. You still, you did experience loss. As I mentioned, when I was telling Enzo's story, everything was going so well for my pregnancy that it was such a curveball when I went into labor. And so there was always that lingering, like, what if? Is this going to happen again? And it did. And I remember going into my 24-week checkup and leaving that appointment, and the doctor saying, like, everything looks so good. They had been checking my cervix, and the length of it to make sure that it wasn't shortening, and everything looked fine. And I remember him telling me, okay, go enjoy your pregnancy. Like, this is because he knew I had gone into labor 24 weeks. So he's like, I think you can like take a breath and like relax, because we made it this far. Everything looks really good. I don't want you to worry anymore. And I was like, yes. And then 2 weeks later, I was heading into the OR for an emergency C-section. It was 6 minutes between me arriving at the hospital and me being wheeled into the OR. And I was put to sleep. The first time I hadn't been. I was awake for Enzo. The second time they put me under fully. And when I woke up, I remember them telling me we had never seen what we saw today when we went in to deliver Ava. And my uterus had ruptured completely. And Ava was not even inside my uterus anymore. She was already like floating in like my abdomen area. And so that, and bring that up because when you go through loss, you want to find someone or something to blame for what you went through. And so the second pregnancy, I was really aware, like, I didn't want to do anything to cause me to go into early labor. Like, I was just I was really scared of being at fault for something. Yeah. And what is really horrible, and what has been something really hard to process and realize that first of all, I'm not to blame, is that I kept being told after the fact, you should have waited 3 years. Why did you get pregnant after a year?
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh my gosh, did I do this? Like, was I so eager to have another baby, to like fill this gap that I have, and that I caused this to happen? And that's a really hard thing to admit to oneself. It's really hard to say out loud.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I have had to come to accept the fact that this is a journey that I'm on. I've had 2 preterm labors. And my daughter is here. And she's gone through a lot in her short life. But I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for, I so appreciate you being so vulnerable, Aisha, and sharing that about Ava's birth and everything and what was said. And I think you bring up a really good observation, which is So the whole thing about having a loss, right, is that you want to do anything possible to prevent it happening again, right? And it becomes a mission. It becomes a job. I'm not going to have this happen again. And so you do everything that you're supposed to do, right? Whatever that is, blah blah blah. And you try to control it as much as possible. But the reality of it is there is so much gray area and mystery and beauty, to be honest, and unknown about this type of medicine. It is not cut and dry. There is a lot of nuance to it. And also, it's really hard because we've all had this experience where you go see one provider and they have a set of criteria or a process that they follow. And then there's a different one that has a completely opposite of that. And it drives you nuts. It drives you crazy, right? Because you're just wanting to say, prescribe me, tell me exactly what to do to make it not happen again. And the hardest part about it is an element of it is a leap of faith, an element. And that's hard for each person to decide, am I ready for that? Am I ready for that extra amount of stress and uncertainty in my life right now? And again, if your situation was similar to Aisha's, anybody who's listening, just like she said, this is not your fault. Every single parent on earth is making the best decisions that they can with the information they have at the time. And I think you made some incredible decisions and advocated incredibly well for your family. And I'm really angry at the people who were like, wait 3 years. Well, like, okay, as I like to say, go suck an egg. Because what am I what
Yeah.
that's like so horrible to say to a mom who's just been through a trauma. And also, like, what good is that information now?
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard. I appreciate you sharing that. But I wonder too how you navigated this idea of, and because I know so many moms are going through this. We have members of our team go through it all the time when they follow through with pregnancy, but like our relationship with Dr. Google, right? Like or Facebook groups. There's so many Facebook groups out on the internet, and discussion boards and different types of things that are for pals or pregnancy after loss, or people with insufficient cervixes, or people who've had HELP syndrome and preeclampsia, or folks who've had different situations with multiples. So you go onto there and you're just flooded with so much information from other people, so many different thousands of different anecdotal situations, right? Well, my water broke at this date and I did this, or I had this cerclage, or I didn't have this cerclage, and this was the outcome. And none of those things are you, right? So none of those can really give you the information that you need to really feel good. I mean, I think it's different for everybody, but I wonder, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. So, when I was pregnant with Enzo and we were waiting, like I had already started labor, we were in the hospital waiting, trying to like make him stay put as long as we could. I would look for like those positive like stories of like, I went into labor at 24 weeks, but we made it to 34 weeks. And because I was thinking that is such a long time. And even doctors would tell me like, hey, yeah, this has happened before, it's possible. And so I would like cling to those stories and just like read them one after another to be like, okay, this is possible. This is trying to like will it to happen. And then it didn't. And that was really hard to be part of the story that didn't go well. But it was also such an awakening for me. Like you said, none of those stories are me, and they could never be me. So the second time around when I was pregnant, I avoided the internet at all costs. I couldn't let myself be inundated with all that information. I couldn't appropriate any of those stories or anecdotes or statistics. I needed to like keep it as far away from me as I could, because I didn't want it to, I think there was part of me that, and I think I mentioned this in the first podcast too, it was really weird how, while I was pregnant with Enzo, I think I read a story on Instagram about a mom and the loss, and I was like heartbroken. And then that kind of just like got obsessed. Like I was like a little bit of an obsession in my head. And then I kind of went, not, it wasn't the same story, but I experienced my own loss. And I said, did I, we hear a lot of like manifestations, and did I attract this to my life? And so the second time around, I was like, I cannot, like, I almost need to be, like have like a cylinder around me of like just protection and not let anything influence anything. Cause I didn't want to feel that guilt. Like I brought this upon myself. So yeah, that's how I kind of approach it, as of like, there was a don't, even I think the only time I ever knew of like the statistics of me going into preterm labor again was at an appointment where I was early on in my pregnancy, and the doctor kind of just listed off like, okay, like these are your chances, these are the stats. And that was the last time I ever spoke about that. I never asked questions about it. I was just like, I'm going to pretend that there isn't any risk. And of course, the whole time I'm doing stuff to prevent it. Like I was given medication early on to like try to help keep me pregnant, I guess. But at the same time, I was just trying to treat it as like I can't think about it too much, because then it will happen.
I mean, I totally agree. First of all, I had that same experience right before I got pregnant. I read a New York Times article, and it was about stillbirth. And I was like, this sounds awful. This would be so terrible if it happened to someone. And I was like, I did it. I brought it on myself.
Yeah.
But I like to think of it as like your brain becomes so hyper aware. Now we know we were in fight or flight, right? When you're going to this kind of second pregnancy. And so you're so hyper aware and hyper vigilant. So I think of it as like, I'm putting up a shield because regularly I might be able to deflect some of this information, but in this state, I know that I would latch onto it, and it's not helpful. Now, I know that there's other circumstances, and people find a lot of the groups and the articles really helpful and really stabilizing. So I want to validate that it's
absolutely.
totally up to, whatever you feel is right. And I think it's about having awareness and maybe asking people you love, I notice after I read this that I have trouble sleeping, or I have more intrusive thoughts, or my heart rate is higher. It's all about making your body feel safe, too. Yeah.
Totally. And it is such a me thing, because even to this day, if I get too involved in reading stories or testimonies, and we have such a beautiful community on Facebook, and sometimes I have to mute it, because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I start noticing things or symptoms that are not really there, that I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm like, Ava's going through this. And so it is, I agree, it is totally an individual thing. And then there's times where I really am just uplifted. And I know you guys are so good at reminding moms to listen to their hearts and where they're at in their journey, and if they need to mute or if they need to take a step back to do it. And I am 100% agree on that.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I love you guys so much, and thank you guys for sharing. It's just an honor to get to just sit here and listen to you talk, and I'm just continually in awe of all that you guys have journeyed through and your children. And so just know it's been very sacred to just be able to sit here and listen. I did want to ask a few kind of logistical, seems like a really gross word, but just like maybe some practical questions too. So not to backtrack, but you guys had mentioned like maybe that year period after you had your firstborn. So, what did those early conversations look like with your partner? And when did you guys know, like, okay, we feel ready, or did you feel ready to start trying again? What did that first look like for you guys?
So for me, I think I would even say the first 6 months after we lost Enzo, I was really kind of grieving and uh, like kind of in a zombie state of just trying to figure out life. And then once 6 months passed, I feel like I could kind of feel like a little bit of a fog that was like lifted, and I know deep down like it was for sure the possibility of like, okay, 6 months from now I can try to have another baby. And I never once stopped longing to have a baby. I wanted it so badly. And I remember at that time I used a nanny, and I had taken a break, or I had stopped when I got pregnant with Enzo, and somewhere around like the 6 months, my boss had called me and said, "Hey, do you want to?" She had a baby a few days after I went into labor with Enzo, so her son would have basically been Enzo's age. And she said, this is super sensitive, and you can say no, but would you want to come back on? I'm needing the help, and I surprised myself and said yes. And those months being able to care for a little baby that would have been my son's age, in such a surprising way, were such a tool for my healing, just to be able to hold a baby. And like, I remember she really wanted me to like help him like sleep on his own, but I would push back and say, no, let me just rock him to sleep, or let me just hold him and like feel this little baby curled up in my arms, because I was missing and longing for that so much. And Andy knew all along. He knew that I needed that. I think when I found out I was pregnant, I don't even think we had a conversation, honestly. I think you're going back to your question. There was never like a talk. I think I remember telling him at one point, like, hey, they said a year, and in a year we can try again. And I know the day that we conceived, I knew I had a plan all along. And I didn't really let him in on that plan. I was really focused on what I wanted and what it was very much like me taking the wheel and saying, okay, I got this. Like, and I remember I knew that I was pregnant before I took the test. And I remember telling Andy, and I remember fear in his eyes when I told him.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I realized I didn't consider him at all in this whole thing. I used him to get to what I wanted. And it was really a very hard thing for me to swallow, because we're a team, and I totally took advantage of him, and it felt so bad. So that first month was me and him then having those conversations, and me letting him in a little bit on what was going on in my heart, and then also giving him the space to have the reaction that he was having, and to not take it personally, and not be like, what, you're not, because of course he was happy, and of course he wanted this baby as much as I did. He just wasn't given the opportunity to process even the idea of bringing a new life into this world. And so I needed to give him that space to do that, and to have the reactions that he was going to have, and to express, like, I'm really afraid, and I don't want to go through this again, and I don't want to lose you. So it was, yeah, that was not probably the way that I wish it would have gone. But it was what happened. It was how we got pregnant. Kind of a little deceitful.
Yeah. No.
And I say that now. I can say that, and I know that my heart,
Yeah.
like you said, Martha, like you make decisions, and I know now that it's, I'm not a monster for going and doing
never.
this, like,
No.
like, because I say these things, and it's like a little bit of a heartache to know, like, that I didn't let my partner in on this part of my life, but at the same time, it also was something that we then have totally built on, and like been able to really be honest with each other from that point on. Like, it allowed for this, like, new dynamic with us that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
I think that is what you bring up, and your experience, I'm sure, is echoed with so many other people, because how many people have we interviewed, Ash, that are like, oh, my partner and I never even talked about what happened, because you kind of are operating under this assumption, and your brain is doing it to you, right, to protect you, that you were both there, so you know what happened, and so you can intuit what the other person feels. And while that is sort of the case, I think what happens is, because you're in flight or fight, you don't have that executive function to be like, oh, I wonder if we should sit down and talk about what happened. We did the exact same thing. We didn't talk about how we felt about any of it until afterwards, because we were all about the logistics. We were like, we've got to do doctor's appointments, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do that. Okay, and we can do this, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, bam, you're pregnant again. Then you have a NICU stay, and you're like, what the heck just happened? Like, I think that's what one thing I would have done differently too, is like, made sure we were both maybe in counseling too. I didn't see a therapist till after we had kids. And I think that would have been really helpful. It could have maybe created cushion and margin for both of us to support each other better. Yeah. Not that our partners are fantabulous. They're wonderful, but still, and the same way, us to support them both ways.
Truly. Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I said at the beginning of this conversation, I said, like, I don't think that my healing really began until after Ava was born, or really, like, when I was really honest about it. So, yeah, 100%. I agree with you there, Martha.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys had kind of mentioned early on in the episode some of the things that people said that were super hurtful or off cuff, and it was like, excuse me. So I'd also love to know, what were there people in your life throughout your second pregnancy that like really helped you, or like you felt super supported by, and how did they support you, and what did that mean for you, or why do you remember it being so impactful?
I can go first. A couple of things. I was really lucky and I mean, it's just dumb luck, that I was in a job where I had people who would make flexibility and accommodations for me. I think it's happening more and more now, but basically, I remember my OB telling me, she was like, you're really lucky that you don't have to quit your job right now. Like, because I was going to be home on bed rest. Part of the reason is because I had to pee every 5 seconds. And if I didn't pee, then I would start having preterm contractions. So she was like, you're very, very blessed. She was like, the vast majority of my patients just have to quit their jobs or use up all 12 weeks of their FMLA and pray to have a position afterwards. But I was very lucky to have an employer who was very flexible, and I worked from home, literally horizontal, like, because I couldn't sit up fully. And that was a really big gift. I also think too, like my mom and my siblings were really supportive of us and really lovely. And I was just thinking about it. I gotta see if I can find it. But I have they made this like chalkboard for me, like a countdown. And so every time I hit a week, they would be like, JJ is blank weeks or
Oh.
whatever. And so they'd come and they like fill it in and that type of thing. And it was really cute. So we had that and yeah, it was very sweet. My mom would just come over and do things for me. Like we had a playhouse in our backyard and she came and painted it. Um in the middle of summer and it was like so hot and I would like come out to like take a peek and she'd be like, go back inside and drink water. It's just the little things that make you feel
Yeah.
like you're not alone, right?
Yep,
Because it also
for
is a
sure.
very isolating experience because
Right.
it's your body and you can't
Yeah.
get away from it. So yeah, those types of things were so beautiful and helpful and not people saying, I know it's going to be different this time, right? I think we cling to certainty. We all do. So this idea of saying, oh, that won't happen again. I'm sure of it. Or
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure it'll be different this time. You and I both know that that's not
Yeah.
the truth. There are so many beautiful people in this community that have wildly varying pregnancy stories, full term, preterm, emergent, planned, all these different things. Some people are able to have home births after they have emergency C-sections, a lot of different experiences. But we know that there is no guarantees and that's hard.
Yeah.
So pretending like it is actually makes it worse.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying, I'm here for you no matter what, right? That's what makes the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And likewise, my family was definitely like, I have two sisters, my mom, they were just awesome and celebrated everything. I had really good friends who also just celebrated every little thing and genuinely like checked in and wanted to be part of this pregnancy and celebrate it. I would say that even with that support, I did feel like I wanted to carry it all by myself. So I would have no trouble celebrating and sharing, even on my socials, updates of like ultrasounds. I was having so many ultrasounds because of my high risk that I loved it because I got to see Ava every week, it felt like. And I loved sharing that. I loved sharing her ultrasound pictures with friends, with anyone that would see. But the hard parts, the anxiety, the fear that I did experience, that I did have, I carried by myself. I didn't want to let people in on that. So I didn't talk too much about this before, but something that was super, super, like what I really was like my rock during my second pregnancy was my faith in scripture. And I did really dive into just like reading a lot of scripture during my second pregnancy. And I would memorize, like I'd never memorized verses before, but that was something that I really like. I needed to like a higher power to sustain me in all of that I was going through, all of the emotions, all the fear. I needed somewhere that I could put that all on, and I knew that I wasn't going to really find that in my peers or in the people in my life, even on my husband. I didn't want to put that on them to begin with. So I really did. I think that was kind of where I turned in that pregnancy, was just really putting it in a higher power and just trusting and trying to let go of any outcome, because like you said, Martha, I was not unaware of like this could go not how I planned. And so I needed someone that, even if things didn't go how I wanted them to go, to like be able to like one. And for me, that was God. And so I think that was good. And I think that in a lot of ways, when things didn't go how I wanted them to go, when I went into labor at 26 weeks, I was able to again trust and let go of some of that. And I don't want to make it sound like, oh, that's going to take away, like I still had a really hard time, and it was still, and I think that a lot came up even after in my faith, that I'm still kind of wrestling with. But I was able to really understand that I am such a small piece in this huge, like, mosaic of life. When you realize all the stories that are around us, it really is such a beautiful experience to be able to do it in a collective, like to know that we're not alone, right? Like that's our message. You're not alone. And so for me, being able to kind of trust that there is something that I will never really understand, but that is taken care of, was a huge part of being able to navigate that second pregnancy, more than tears, more than like those assurances that I couldn't really accept.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of like an antidote to that thing that we hear all the time, which is, and it drives me nuts. I'm sure you guys see it. Ashley, we've talked about it, but our bodies were made to have babies, right? This kind of conversation. First of all, I mean, yeah, like logistically, yeah, in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of different things. There's like genetic mutations and birth defects. Like what I have is a birth defect, and environmental and socioeconomic and unfortunately like racial factors that come into play because of like systemic racism in these systems. There's a lot of other factors at play that have nothing to do with you and your ability to desire or physical capability, right? I think it's just really unfair that we put that on women and people who give birth to say, well, this should just come naturally. And as if it doesn't, or if something terrible happens, like we've both experienced, what does that mean? That means that we did something wrong, because if everybody else can do it, what's wrong with us, right? By the way, we have a really fun special guest in the background, which is Silas, and he looks so cute. He's wearing headphones. Oh my gosh, he's got lime green headphones that match his Ninja Turtle shirt. Well, as Ashley assists our fourth guest there, which is Silas, I wonder if we want to just wrap up. And we like to end all of our episodes by asking what encouragement you would say or provide to a mom or a family who is considering having, getting pregnant, having another baby, or is currently pregnant and having another baby after a NICU loss or after a pregnancy loss. What words of wisdom would you share with them?
So to you, dear NICU mama, who is considering having another pregnancy after a loss, or who is currently pregnant after experiencing loss, I want you to know that however you got to this point, whatever you need in this moment, however you feel right now, is valid. I don't want you to feel guilty or shame, because you are worth having a beautiful experience and bringing life into this world. You deserve it. And however that happens, and maybe it doesn't happen, that doesn't take away your worth. I just really, really, really want you to hear that you are worth it, and you are valuable, and you are loved.
I love Aisha so much. That's so beautiful. Also, earlier at the beginning of the episodes, I started crying and I was like, you gotta get it together, Martha. So that did not help. I mean, obviously everything Aisha said was beautiful and perfect, and LOL, what could I add to it? But all I would say is that you just there are certain things in life that will feel 100% yes or 100% no in your life. And I wish I could say that I know that you will feel like, yes, I'm 100% ready, or no, I know for sure that I'm 100% done, right? But it might not ever feel that way, and that's okay. Know that you're not alone in that experience. And whatever you choose with your future, or like you said, if maybe it's not even a choice at all for you, I hope you just know that where you're at is completely valid, and we can all just make the best decisions that we can with the information we have at the time. Just keep checking in with yourself, check in with your partner and your loved ones to create as much extra space for yourself as possible during this time. Like Aisha said, you're worthy of that time. You don't need to be bringing on any extra stress. You don't need to be, you deserve to do what feels right for you, is all I should say. Well, Aisha, thank you so much for being here today. It's always such a gift to talk with you and chat and hear about your beautiful kids. I think that you're like a warm cup of tea. You're just very stabilizing and lovely. And I also would encourage everyone to make sure you listen to Aisha's episodes. Make sure you read the letters that she's written for us and what she's shared as part of our editorial team. She's a gift to the community. And so are you, listeners. You are a gift as well.
Well, my dear friends, thank you so much for sharing. And from the sisterhood to you, just know that we honor all that your body has gone through, all that you have gone through, and that this sisterhood is committed to honoring and remembering all of your children. And so thank you for being here and for giving us the chance to hear your heart. And to other lost mamas in our community, we hope that you feel hugged and seen today. And no matter where you are in your family building journey, just know that we are with you. So we love you. We will be back next week, but thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Dear NICU Mama podcast.
If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful for a review on any of the podcast platforms.
And we'd love to continue connecting with you via our social media pages or a private Facebook group. And ultimately, NICU Mama, welcome to the sisterhood.